Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dina, for introducing us. Then I don't have to do it because we have a lot of information in our packed presentation. I'm just sharing my screen now. Just 1 second. So my name is Johanna Vordemfelde. I work for ICLA Europe, and I am German, so you can ask German questions if you would have any. But today we're here to introduce FEAST. It's a European Horizon project. It's about food systems that support transitions to healthy and sustainable diets. So we're all about health and sustainability. It's coordinated by the University of Heidelberg. So we really have like this public health background with this project. With ICLA, we're coordinating the work on the living labs. So working with different municipalities and connecting them to the scientific partners of the project. Okay, so just to get us started, the objectives of FEAST are four. So to understand barriers and facilitators that influence the dietary behavior of different vulnerable groups. We're really targeting vulnerable groups with this project, very connected to what Melanie Speck just said. And then we want to empower individuals to adopt healthier and more sustainable dietary behaviors. We want to collaborate with key stakeholders in Europe's food systems to enable consumers to make informed food choices and also increase the adoption of food and health policies on a national and also European scale. And of course, we want to do this by presenting data because we just want to propose policies that really work in the end and have an effect on dietary behavior. With the FEAST living labs, we understand them as organizations or municipalities where innovation can happen, and we can coordinate this with science and really have some experiments and take away some outputs from these organizations. In FEAST, we have several ones. You can see that they are quite spread throughout whole Europe, and all living labs are doing different things and have different vulnerable target groups and interventions they want to do with them. So it's really spread out. We have one in Greece, Citia, then also Guldbøksund in Denmark. So really all Europe is represented. How are the FEAST living labs set up? This is quite important because in other European Horizon projects, they are made up pretty top down, and we try to have this very bottom up process with them. So basically we have in our consortium 50% of practitioners, so municipalities and cities, and then 50% scientific partners, and they work closely together. When we look at the living labs, they are all paired with one scientific partner. So the interventions that's happening is really like accompanied by science. And so on the practitioner side, we see that there is an exhaustive bottom-up co-design and creation process. So we don't want to impose anything on these municipalities, but they talk to the stakeholder groups they work with and then design interventions that help the communities they want to have an impact on. We acknowledge expert knowledge in communities, so we really understand experts as the people who live the reality that we're targeting, but I'm saying something about that a bit later. And then FEAST municipalities are full partner and get funding in our project, so they are not an associated partner, but really through our proposal and the grant agreement with the European Commission, they get paid for the work they do. The scientific partner, on the other hand, they empower the living labs with their own research and focus and design. So everything the living lab does, if it's design or plan or implement or evaluate, is accompanied by the scientific partner. But all of this is not imposed by the scientific interests, so by the academic studies that the scientific partner wants to do, but really looking at what does the community want to do, and the science is accompanying this. In terms of food environments, so what are we dealing with? These pictures are, again, very similar to Melanie Speck's pictures. I think it's just the topic of food environment is a bit similar in this way. So one of the things we target is, of course, this topic of food deserts and where do we buy food. So you see on the left-hand side, this like junk food neighborhood. So where are the points where people can buy food? Is it really, is it junk food? And is the selling point for the next fresh food market, for example, very far away? This we want to change to more like neighborhoods where the infrastructure for buying food it's much better. So we want affordable and accessible, healthy and sustainable food sold in neighborhoods. then the topic of what food is served to you. Again, a picture we know already, the famous currywurst. So we want to go from unhealthy food served in canteens to very like freshly prepared and also sustainable food in canteens, because we think, for example, in school canteens and kindergartens, that children learn from what they are served, but also we work with one living lab that's targeting industry canteens. So this is also an interesting factor in terms of how much meat is sold or how much plant-based can we include in our diets. Then this is a bit of a special issue. So how can we harvest food and knowledge? It's a twofold issue. You see here one neighborhood that's really just houses and streets, and then the edible city of Andernach, which is of course full of green spaces and growing plants. What I want to say with these pictures is basically where in our neighborhoods do we come in contact with growing food, with harvesting food, and where can we exchange about our knowledge about cooking and the diets and, well, the food we eat in the end. And I think this is super important, and many living labs of FEAST are also targeting this knowledge transfer. So what we've learned so far from our work with the living labs, and it's just 5 points. I guess there's going to be more. We're just 1.5 years in, so it's going to be a couple of years more. First of them being that co-design and creation process can be tricky when stakeholders don't feel that that change is going to happen. So what we observe a lot with these living labs is that many people are asked many questions and they tend to get into research fatigue. So they don't want to answer more questions if they don't see that any outcome is coming from what they share. Secondly, sustainable and healthy food choices are dependent on a social component that we cannot leave out. So this is also something that has been said before, but if we look at a low-income neighborhood where people cannot afford food, then it's not the first step to implement this very ecological food stand, but it would be to go step by step and maybe implement a bit more fresh food first, and and see it as a step by step. The third one being that changing food environments is easy in theory and it can be very tricky in practice. I think this is super obvious, but of course we have built environment in cities. We have conflicting interests if we look at housing, for example. And then of course economic factors play a role. When trying to change food behavior and also food environments, we have to start with what is there. So we really have to take into account food traditions, for example. Is it a Mediterranean diet we deal with? What kinds of ingredients are used usually? Then dietary habits. And what I find very important is to look at capacity that people or populations have for cooking and grocery shopping in the end. My last point is that the stakeholder group we want to influence is at the same time our source for expert knowledge. So we don't want to rely on science too much, because we understand people in, for example, low-income households, and I think Hannelore is going to say a bit more about that, to also have hold the expert knowledge that they want to share with us, and we have to understand these people as experts and also acknowledge that in terms of financial rewards. With this, I want to pass over to Hannelore, who's representing the Ghent Living Lab, and want to ask her if you can tell us about Ghent's process of co-creating and then institutionalizing the food policy you have.
Yes, thank you, Johanna. Although my name is German, I do speak Dutch, and I will take you to the city of Ghent first to give you a small introduction. Ghent is in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. We are in between Antwerp and Bruges. We have a historic center, we attract a lot of tourists, and we also have a large student community. There's a lot of different nationalities, and 20% of our inhabitants have a low income. But it makes, we do have a large food scene. It's on the next slide. Yes. Johanna? Yeah, thank you. We have a large food scene. So we have a lot of community farms, 6. It's like community served agriculture. We have a lot of distribution points where people can get their vegetable packages. We have a scene of farmers markets, and it's not like a tourist attraction. It's really a market on a weekly basis where you can go and do your shopping for the rest of the week. We have social restaurants. I will tell you more about it later on. A large veggie and vegan scene, and it's all of those things is a bit of the reason that we have already for 10 years a food strategy. It is created by the Food Council 10 years ago. You can go to the next slide, please. So we are celebrating our 10th anniversary of that food strategy. The Food Council is really the motor of that strategy, and it's a combination of all different stakeholders, and we do not make any decision in our food strategy without the consultation of those stakeholders. That's the most important thing that I can tell you about the Food Council. There's a lot of things to talk about that, but this is our we use that multi-stakeholder approach also within our living lab. Johanna, I'll give you the word.
Yeah, thank you, Hannelore. And then I wanted to know from you, how do you work with low-income households, and what is new to your approach maybe of having a food choice?
So our work with those low-income households, we continue with our co-creative approach. So we already have in our Food Council a representation of a lot of social organizations, the poverty director of the city, the welfare department, or a member of the Food Council. So we did a call in the Food Council who wants, which stakeholders do want to be in our steering group to create the living lab of FEAST. And so we have a range of experts advising us. And so that's really important. They do make the strategic choices for us, or we do it together. But then we have a strong collaboration with poverty organizations as well, to create our intervention and to, for example, on this very moment, we are doing a lot of participative observations in food larders, and I do cooperate with a poverty expert by experience. So that's somebody who is really trained to give policy advice from the background of being grown up in a low-income household. So we will design new interventions together with those stakeholders and with people living in poverty. And then to give an answer on the other part of your question, we do not focus on food larders. We don't want to focus on the surplus food that is often being redistributed to people in poverty. But it's on the next slide, Johanna, that I can give you some more explanation about a system that we have in Ghent. In fact, it's about double pricing or solidarity pricing systems. We have an official circuit funded by the city. So there's 10 social restaurants in our city where people in poverty can go, but everybody can go, in fact. So if I go, I pay 14 euros for the menu of the day. And if you are under a certain income, you pay less. So there's like, I think 8 euros, and then it goes to 3 euros. But you go there, yeah, everybody can go, but to pay the low price, you need a referral. So the referral is given by the social welfare department. And we have the same system with social grocery stores. But what we do see now is that there's like a bottom-up, non-official circuit, like restaurants, retail, local grocery stores, and even the CSA farms and the farmer markets. They want to start up a double pricing system, not funded by the city, but based on the solidarity that they have with their customs. So for us as a local government, really interesting to see what is happening. So we want to introduce that to make changes in a food environment. And that takes us to where our living lab is. And the next, yes.
Yeah, we agreed to do this interview thing. So yes. I'm going to ask this question. In which concrete food environment your intervention is taking place?
So we have two environments in two very different neighborhoods. The first one is called the Hele Hartweek, the Holy Heart. It's a really dense population, a lot of different nationalities living there. There's a lot of offer of fast food. There's also a lot of social initiatives there, but there's no connection in between them. And there we see there's a food larder serving 600 households, so really a big one. But those people do not use the rest of the offer in that specific neighborhood. Although there is a farmer's market, as you can see on the picture. And this particular farmers market, they want to introduce that double pricing system. The church that you see on the picture, it's a church that is not in use anymore, and it will be within 2 months. They are really working very fast. It will be a social restaurant as well. So it's for us an interesting point in the time to start up an intervention there. So what we want to do is change the food environment. And if we speak in types of food environment, this is called a food swamp. So it means there's a lot, but you can sink in or drown in the in the junk food and the fast food and the kebab shops that are in there. So there we want to bring all those stakeholders together and create a shared vision where it comes to sustainable and healthy food. So we want to make it accessible through that double pricing systems, and we want to introduce those systems together with the people in poverty. So we make sure that we take away all the barriers to make it accessible for everybody. Then the other area.
Hannelore, I just received the message that we're out of time.
Oh no, that's a shame. Yeah, we have another one, a food desert, the opposite. Yeah, it's a bit the same. There's no offer, but there are a lot of stakeholders. So there we want to. That's not a matter of making connection, but really start up new initiatives with potential stakeholders. Yeah, but we can close.
Great, thank you so much.
And then there's time for some Q&A, I guess.
Thank you so much.